I don't have money like that on me.
Damon thought, feeling even more irritated.
I'll pay you $3,000. I think you should accept that. It's a lot more than the bottle's worth.
Jasper laughed.
You must be kidding,
came his reply just before he ended the call. The crowd stood in astonished silence. The stall owner and his wife held their hands to their mouths in horror at what they had just heard, and the servers seemed to have disappeared.
These guys nuts.
A woman standing close by whispered. Damon had even shocked Thomas.
Something's changed with Damon. He's remained calm and focused throughout this mess,
he thought. Kyle and his thugs each found a chair and sat down, looking unperturbed. The crowd took their behavior to mean that things were calming down, and they started talking quietly among themselves about what the outcome would be. The stall owner found his voice as he focused on Damon.
Young man, you've caused trouble for yourself,
he stammered. The crowd seemed to have swelled in numbers as word had quickly gotten around about what was happening. Everyone had arrived to see Damon and find out what he would do next. Thomas didn't agree with the way Damon had handled the situation. As Damon's father's personal assistant, he was extremely well known in the city, and one thing he never did was deal with criminal gangsters like Jasper. Damon saw the way Thomas was looking at him.
Do you think I've made a mistake?
Thomas shook his head.
I'm not sure yet. It's difficult to know how to deal with local thugs.
Damon looked pensive.
Maybe it's because they need to be shown they're not as tough as they think they are.
He was aware of what he had done. If he wanted to have any influence in Hillwood, he had to make himself known, and this would be one way to do that. There was a commotion down the street, and suddenly someone yelled,
"Jasper's coming!"
Damon turned around and saw a man walking down the street toward them. As he got closer, Damon noticed he was an unkempt, middle-aged man who had gone soft around the middle. He waited for him to get closer before he walked out to meet him. The surprise registered on Jasper's face when he realized Damon was a young man, probably of university age. He scowled.
I've come to meet a kid,
he thought, feeling irritated. Jasper's eyes turned to slits as he watched Damon walk toward him.
You'd better have the amount I asked for. You don't want to be wasting my time, kid.
Damon turned around and looked at Damon called Thomas once again. Thomas had been anticipating the call. He was eagerly waiting for Damon's instructions on who to start action against.
Don't you worry about anything.
Instructions on who to start action against.
Don't you worry about anything, Mr. Hemsworth. This sort of thing is right up my alley. I'm not sure whether you know that the Serafino family made a lot of money in the early days by giving out loans, and I was the one responsible for collecting the monthly payments.
He explained, chuckling.
I'll get to liquidating the Laurier family's assets immediately.
Thomas made it sound as though it was a simple transaction. He had a team of various professionals who had the capability of destroying a country at the Serafino family's request. Bringing the Laurier family to its knees would be a piece of cake. Damon knew he had many tricks up his sleeve.
No one in Hillwood has any idea what's about to happen,
he thought. Enzo had a cold smile on his face as he put his phone down after Damon's call. Several men in suits hovered in the background.
I can't believe you had the gall to threaten me, Damon.
He thought with a laugh.
I don't think you understand just how powerful my family is.
He lifted a hand and clicked his fingers at one of the men.
Get in touch with Teresa Vandergelt and tell her that she and her sister will be spending the night with me,
he instructed with a smirk.
If they do everything I ask and I enjoy their company, I'll sell them this piece of metal for $5 million.
He burst out laughing. He knew he was pushing his luck, but deep down, he also knew the Vandergelts had no choice but to accept and do as he said.
I have the arrogant Teresa eating out of the palm of my hand,
he thought gloatingly. Enzo was confident that she would do anything to save Blue Sky Pharmaceuticals after all she had done to build it into such a successful company.
She won't want all her work to be for nothing,
he thought. He also knew that if she was exposed as a fraud, the entire Vandergeld family would be implicated in the process.
She'll do anything to avoid that,
he told himself happily. He sat enraptured as he imagined how it would feel to have a couple of beautiful Vandergeld women at his beck and call.
That's what I'm talking about.
He said out loud to no one in particular.
That's the kind of life I deserve.
Enzo had always enjoyed manipulating and humiliating any woman who dared to cross him. Meanwhile, Teresa couldn't believe her ears after the call she had received from Enzo's assistant. She stood in stunned silence. She knew what Enzo wanted and felt she had no choice but to comply with his demands. Her family was in an extremely compromised position, and she hadn't had time to gather her wits and put a plan together. Tiffany woke up in the university's hospital and tried to get out of bed.
You can't get up yet.
The nurse explained as she gently pushed her back against the pillows.
The intravenous drip hasn't been in your arm long enough.
Tiffany looked confused but ignored the nurse as she silently pulled the needle out of her arm. She got out of bed and left the ward, still ignoring the nurse's pleas. She knew that something bad was about to happen to her family and wanted to get home as quickly as possible. In the hospital corridor, she bumped into Abigail, who was returning from the vending machine.
What are you doing?
Abigail furiously demanded as she did a 180 and tried to catch up to her friend. But Tiffany didn't slow down. As she reached the hospital's entrance, she bumped into Damon, who was there to check in on her. She eyed the bag of snacks he was carrying, but he didn't attempt to offer it to her. Tiffany felt uncomfortable when she saw Damon, and she started to cry.
Damon, I'm sorry you had to pretend to be my boyfriend at the party. Looking back, I'm sure that was humiliating. But why did you do this?
She sobbed as tears streamed down her face. Her body was racked with sobs, and anyone seeing the crying woman would have felt extremely sorry for her. Before Damon could say anything, Abigail pitched up. She glared angrily at Damon as she linked arms with Tiffany and tried to drag her away from him.
I told you to stay away from him.
She reprimanded her friend.
How many times do I have to tell you that he's a douchebag?
Abigail's berating only made Tiffany feel worse, and she cried even louder.
I'm sorry.
She blubbered, trying to apologize to Damon once more. She then freed her arm from Abigail's grip, turned around, and ran down the street. As she ran, her mind filled with regrets.
I shouldn't have let myself get so close to him. I should have been careful and not cut myself after staying up all night trying to learn how to fold stupid paper stars.
She berated herself silently. Damon felt utterly surprised and useless because he knew Tiffany had misunderstood him, but it was pointless trying to defend himself at that moment. As soon as he had the original piece of metal in his hands and had collected the money from Enzo's family, he would explain everything to her.
Hang on. Perhaps there will be no need for me to explain it all to her. I'll let the Laurier family do that. I'll make sure they do,
he thought. Tiffany's phone rang as she left the campus grounds. She thought it was Damon, so quickly answered. To her frustration, it was Enzo.
What does he want now?
She wondered, feeling irritated.
Tiffany, come to the Laurier Hotel tonight.
He instructed arrogantly. Confused, she looked at the screen of her phone to confirm it was Enzo who was speaking to her so rudely.
If you want to save your family from disgrace, I suggest you dress in something sexy. Oh, and before I forget, bring your sister as well.
Then, he ended the call without letting her say anything, showing her utter disrespect. He didn't care that everyone thought she was a goddess. To him, she was someone to be played with. Tiffany started to tremble uncontrollably and sat heavily on the ground. She felt as though she carried the troubles of the world on her shoulders. Damon left the hospital grounds and headed to the canteen. When he got there, he looked around for Melanie, but she wasn't in her usual place and was nowhere to be found. The canteen was empty. He went to ask the chef whether she had seen Melanie that lunchtime because she was the only person in the canteen who knew how to communicate with her.
Have you seen Melanie today by any chance?
The chef shook her head.
No. Strangely, I haven't. It's peculiar because she's usually the first in line.
Damon also thought that was strange.
Okay, thank you. Maybe she's not feeling well today,
he suggested. He hung around for a while, and students came and went, but no Melanie. He decided to call her, but there was no response. Starting to feel uneasy, he scrolled through her recent text messages. Even though he was an early riser, she usually got up even earlier and would send him a message every morning as his alarm went off.
Damon, get up. It's time for breakfast.
Was that morning's message.
Damon, you big fool.
Get up and get ready for breakfast. Another read. Damon, you were almost late yesterday, so get up early for breakfast today. Was one from a few days before. He couldn't quite put a finger on how he felt about her and the messages she sent him every day without fail. But he had taken to seeking her out and treating her with respect at every opportunity. To him, she was like a sunflower that bloomed and followed the kindness he had shown her. But he knew she was afraid of what others would say when they saw how wonderfully he treated her because she didn't think she was worth it. As he stood there pondering what to do, he recalled the words of a small note that she had written for him to read. My love for someone is as minute as a speck of dust, but it will still bloom into a flower. He dialed her number once again, but there was still no response. He wasn't going to give up, so he kept redialing for over 30 minutes as he tried to hold his panic at bay. Eventually, his call was answered with a squeak on the other side. He breathed a sigh of relief.
Melanie, why didn't you come for breakfast or lunch today? I bought you enough snacks to last you a month. I bet you haven't seen this much food in your life.
He let the relief finish washing over him and continued.
The canteen is closed now, but don't worry. I can take you out for some food if you're hungry. I've never actually told you how much money I've got, but believe me, I've got more than enough.
He was so excited that he didn't realize he had let on more than he should. He became more and more animated as he spoke. After he eventually stopped talking, he realized that Melanie hadn't said a word.
Melanie, why aren't you saying anything? Are you angry? Oh gosh, I'm such an idiot. I forgot that you don't speak. Please text me.
The last thing Damon expected after he finished talking was to hear Melanie burst into tears on the other end of the phone. Her sobs sounded as though her heart was breaking. It was the first sound he had ever heard from her, and it was gut-wrenching for him. He dropped the bag of snacks and gripped his cell phone with both hands.
Melanie,
he whispered.
What's wrong? Why didn't you come to breakfast this morning? Where did you go?
Again, there was no response, but her sobbing got louder.
What the hell is going on?
Damon clenched his fists as he roared. Melanie's cries continued to get even louder, as though something terrible was happening to her. Damon forced himself to get a grip.
It's okay. Just send me your location, and I'll be with you as soon as I can. I'm coming. There's no need to cry.
He had just finished reassuring her when there was an extremely loud noise on Melanie's side, and her phone died. He went cold. Thomas.
Give him $3,000, please.
Jasper's mouth dropped open.
Seriously, that's not what I asked for. This guy's playing games. I didn't think he was being serious when he challenged the amount I asked for.
He thought. Jasper knew the wealthy families in Hillwood and those who would stand up to him, but he had no idea who Damon was or which family he belonged to. Thomas hurriedly climbed into their luxury vehicle.
Okay, Mr. Hemsworth, I'm off to the bank. I won't be long,
he said without hesitation as he drove off. Damon ignored Jasper's comments and stood in his path with a straight face as he waited for Thomas to bring the money. Jasper took in the luxury vehicle and the way Damon spoke to Thomas. He realized he was important and decided not to contest the amount he would be getting for the bottle of wine.
Anyway, I was pushing my luck asking for so much.
He thought in resignation.
That stuff's like vinegar.
He strode over to where Kyle was sitting.
Is this guy local?
I'm paying you for the wine, so you don't need to bother about who I am.
Damon remonstrated. Jasper scowled at him. The realization slowly dawned on him that Damon wasn't from Hillwood. There was nobody in that city who would stand up to him like he had, so he decided to let things be until he found out who he was dealing with. It was clear Damon's only interest was paying for the wine and getting Jasper out of his face. After standing deep in thought for a while, Jasper turned to address Damon once again.
Listen, don't worry about paying for the wine. I can see you're from a good family and just wanted to make things right for your friend here.
He explained, trying to come across as forgiving and generous because he wanted to gain favor with the stranger. Jasper knew from experience that it was better for business to have those with influence with him as opposed to being against him. In his warped thinking, he thought that it would be more beneficial to try and foster some sort of relationship with Damon and have him owe him in case he needed him further down the line. If he took the money from Damon, there would be no chance of that happening.
The fact this guy has an assistant who drives him around in a luxury vehicle at his beck and call makes him someone I don't want to mess with.
Jasper thought.
What's gotten into you? You're being suspiciously nice.
Nothing. And I'm not. Just ask me anything you want to know.
Thomas had just driven up and had heard the last part of Jasper's sentence. His eyebrows climbed as he felt impressed by Damon's deviousness. Damon instructed Thomas to leave the money in the car, and they walked into the barbecue stall. Kyle had witnessed everything and was confused by his boss's behavior.
Boss, are you going to let this kid get away with not paying for the wine? He also showed you disrespect by not knowing who you are.
Before Kyle could say anything else, Jasper pushed him back onto his chair. It took Kyle totally by surprise because that wasn't the way Jasper usually treated him. The chair almost toppled over backward before a shocked Kyle caught himself by grabbing a nearby table.
Don't call him a kid,
Jasper hissed.
But that's what he is.
Kyle replied indignantly. Jasper leaned over Kyle and grabbed his shirt collar with both hands. As he did so, a flick knife fell out of his top jacket pocket.
You made trouble for Mr. Hemsworth.
He threatened as spittle flew over Kyle's face.
I think you should apologize for being so rude.
Kyle was totally taken aback. He couldn't understand his boss's strange behavior.
What the hell's gotten into him?
He wondered.
I've never seen him back down like this before.
Jasper had always been protective of his underbosses like Kyle, but he couldn't have them questioning his authority, especially in front of the men he had brought with him for security.
Don't worry about it,
Damon said to Jasper.
He was just doing what you'd expect him to do.
This has nothing to do with you, Mr. Hemsworth. I'll take care of my men any way I see fit.
Damon tilted his head in acknowledgement and took Melanie's hand. They hurriedly left the food stall and climbed into the car. As they drove off, Thomas decided to get something off his chest.
Mr. Hemsworth, I understand you want to control the likes of Jasper, but this isn't over.
Damon didn't reply, and he didn't care whether Jasper thought it was over or not. His main concern was how Melanie was doing.
Are you okay?
He asked gently, with concern written all over his face. Melanie made her thumb and index finger into a circle with the 3 remaining fingers straight and showed him the OK sign while she smiled shyly at him.
She's so lovely,
Damon thought.
She still has a smile even after everything that's happened to her today.
He knew that she relished her independence, but felt that she needed to make changes if she wanted to stay safe.
I think you should stop working there.
She looked mortified and vigorously shook her head. She signed with her hands that she needed the job. Damon didn't quite understand what she was trying to tell him, but quickly had an idea.
Thomas, please, can you find someone who can teach me sign language? Do you know how to do sign language?
It took a second before Thomas replied.
You know, I think this young lady should be examined by a professional because I have a feeling she doesn't have a speech impediment. Perhaps something else is going on with her that can be dealt with, and she can be given back her ability to speak. There are excellent professionals at our disposal, and I have one particular doctor in mind who just might be able to help. Should I contact her?
Really?
Damon began to feel excited.
Of course.
They dropped Melanie outside her dorm, and Damon remembered to give her the bag of snacks he had bought for her. As they were driving out of the university grounds, his phone rang. An unknown number lit the screen. He answered the call and heard a woman's voice.
Damon, it's Teresa,
came the soft voice through his phone. He thought it sounded as though she had been crying.
What's wrong?
He demanded, scowling.
It's my sister. She's going to throw herself into the river, and it's all my fault. I borrowed the rare metal you gave to her to promote my company because I know how important it could be to the medical industry, but it's all gone terribly wrong, and my family is facing the worst crisis in its history.
She started to sob loudly once more. Damon heard her blow her nose before she continued.
Enzo told us that if Tiffany and I spend the night with him, he'll sell us back the original metal, which is the only way we can stop the company from going bankrupt.
Enzo! I should have known he'd somehow make a play in this.
Damon thought angrily.
So, did you agree to his demands?
Damon asked tentatively. Teresa explained that she hadn't wanted to, but she owed her family everything. They had sent her abroad to study and had helped her build her company into what it was. She just couldn't allow them to be torn apart and destroyed.
I don't care about myself. All I want is for you to stop my sister from throwing herself into the river. I'll pay you anything to take her away from Hillwood. The further, the better,
she said, her voice full of concern and love for Tiffany. Damon took a deep breath.
That won't be necessary. Can you pass a message on to Tiffany for me?
Yes, of course. I'll do anything to help her.
Ask her to do a countdown for 3,600 seconds.
What's the use of that?
Teresa asked, sounding confused.
When the countdown is over, the Laurier family will collapse.